So first thing you want to do is you probably want to download the engine. So I'm going to go and download the release branch here, download zip. And if you don't have access to this, you need to log into epicgames.com and make sure your GitHub account is associated with your engine account. And that way you have access. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to have access and you can't compile from source. In the future, there will be a version that does not require compiling from source, but until then, we don't have that option. So, once we're done downloading here, it's about 200 megs. Put this somewhere sane. I usually recommend putting it in a folder that has no spaces in the name. I'll be naming this particular install Unreligion Spout Test, which is kind of a long name. But it does take some time to extract. And we're doing this live, so no jump cuts here. So we're done extracting, now we're just copying these files over. Copying this over. And 7-zip's no longer cooperating with me. There we go. So I want to rename this UE4 test. Again, I prefer having no spaces in any of the names, but that's up to you. Once you get this downloaded, you want to run setup.bat. And this runs a little command prompt, and it will make you download some other stuff. So, here we go, downloading. Alright, so we got that done downloaded. Once you're done downloading, you want to run generate project files. And so when you're done generating project files, you'll want to compile the engine. And this could take some time. So you open up the UE4.sln file, and if you're like me, your Visual Studio opens up way too goddamn big. But after a few seconds, you can resize it. Here we go. So first thing you want to do in here is go to UE4. Make sure that's just selected, I guess. Actually, the very first thing you should do is go to development and make sure this is on development editor. It should already be on it, but this box is really tiny, so it's hard to see sometimes. So make sure you're on development editor, and then make sure you're on Win64, Win32 if you're on 32-bit, but you should be on Win64. It should work on both cases, but please just use Win64. So once you have development editor definitely selected and Win64, right-click UE4 on the left and click build, and at the bottom it's going to take a while. For me, it doesn't take too long, about 10 minutes, but for you, it could take anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour. So for those of you following this live stream tutorial, you'll see that there's two parts of this. One is the header section, which is really relatively short. So when you see 34 out of 34, you're not done yet. You're just getting started. So, yeah. Alright, so we're done compiling. And when you're done compiling, it's good to always compile the shader compile worker. You can do that by right-clicking and hitting build. You usually only have to do this the first time you build the engine from source. So first time you build it, please remember to build shader compile worker. Pretty important that you do that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to compile shaders, and that's a problem. And that's also in the README here. It tells you to do some of that stuff. So, in addition to the shader compile worker, I always build the Unreal front end because some things seem to depend on it, and I prefer not to build it later. But this is a little bit optional. But if you're here compiling things, you might as well compile everything, right? And this doesn't take very long to compile. Once you compile the base project, then you're fine. Alright, so this is now compiled. So one last thing, I like to build automation tool. This should already be built though, but I like to build it anyway. And with those built, you can now minimize this, and you can now load the editor. Easiest way to load the editor is to go to Engine, Binaries, Win64, because that's what you built, and go to UE4editor.exe, and this will load a launch page, not necessarily the editor, but a place where you can create a project of your own. Now, if you already have your own C++ project, you probably didn't do any of this, but for the people doing this from scratch, you do need to have a C++ project just to ensure that the plugin builds reliably. So when this loads, I'll walk you through on how to build a C++ project, which should not take that long. But the first time you load Unreal, it always takes a while because it has to compile shaders, which is why you built that shader compile worker tool. If you don't build that, you usually get a crash at this point or some sort of related error that's a little weird. So, okay, so you get something like this. You probably won't have any projects in here, but I already have some existing projects from some other stuff, so that's why you see that. So I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to go to C++, and because I don't need any functionality, I'm just going to use basic code, and for the folder, I'm going to put this in the same spot I put my engine. You don't have to, but it's usually a good idea to. If you're following along, I recommend doing it because you're following along, so why not skip on this? I'm just going to call this my project. So when I hit create project, it's going to do some stuff. And at this point, I'm going to close all my copies of Visual Studio because it's going to open up a new one. And on the left, you're going to see the name of your project under the games window. And you can right click it and hit build. You should still be on development editor 64-bit, but make sure you are, just in case you're not. And this one takes a lot less time to compile since it's only compiling your project, which is really small. So, and we're done. You're done when it says 1 succeeded or whatever. So now that that's done, we can open up UE4 editor again. Or actually, sorry, we don't need to do that. You know what? Let's do it. Let's do it. So we're gonna open up UE4 editor and itch my nose, and then we're gonna open up the new project we just made. Oh, my nose! Just to see that the project loads. So currently we haven't done anything Spout specific for the past, what, half an hour? However long this is. This is all very basic, how to even get how to compile the engine from source code. So if you want to show people how to compile the engine from source, you can cut it right here. You're done. This is that point. Now we're starting from, you have your engine compiled from source. How do you add the Spout plugin to your C++ project? So as you can see here, we have our project called My Project. It's a C++ blank project template. And if I hit play, it doesn't really do anything, but it works. So it doesn't crash. Everything is good. Everything is Gucci, Prada, Armani, whatever clothing brand you wear, it's that. So with that done, we now have to move over and actually pull down the Spout plugin. So this is where things get a lot more tricky. Like run DMC. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to pull up GitHub, and when you want to go to my repo, which there's a link in. You probably found this video by this link because this video is probably going to be unlisted. And then it goes, you're at the GitHub, so you want to hit download zip, or if you're using an actual like source tree or something, you can do that. But as long as you get the files here, what you want to do is you want to open up your archive or your repo, go to your engine folder that's inside, and you're just going to copy paste or drag and drop onto your existing engine that you just set up, and that should put all my files into your engine build. And I want to close Visual Studio because it's important that that's closed before we do the next step. But to verify that it worked, the drag and drop, go to plugin or engine plugins, runtime, and make sure you see a Spout plugin folder. Now, because we're doing this live, if there's a chance for it to not work, this is it. So after you're done doing this, run generate project files again, and this should not take too long. And it seems to have worked fine. So from here, what you want to do is, what do you want to do? You want to open up your solution folder file again. Now, if you did not put your your project into your same folder as your engine, you want to go to your Visual Studio a little bit different way. And I'll show you that by going to Engine, Binaries, Win64, UE4.exe, and opening up your project again, essentially. Now this is for if you have not put your project in the same folder. If you did, you should be able to open up that SLN file that we did before, and it should be just fine. But just in case. Alright, so once you get this open, you want to go to Open Visual Studio. And the reason why you do this through here is that it ensures Visual Studio has the right project files open if, once again, you did not put your project into the same folder as your engine folder. But if you followed me, you already did that, and you can now just open the SLN as you did before. And in your My Project solution folder tree here, expand this to Source, My Project, and open up the build.cs file. And in this file here, you're going to add something called a dependency to the Spout plugin module. And to do that, all you're going to do is, where it says public dependency module names, add a comma in here, add double quotes, and type in Spout plugin, and add some other quotes to end that off. Save this, and then build My Project by right-clicking, hitting build. You should still be on development editor Win64. That doesn't change, but please verify that you're on that. And we'll let this build. Now, if we're lucky, you should see text down here at the bottom that says something with the Spout plugin, some related not to the Spout plugin. It might actually fail because I just realized we missed a whole set of steps. Whoops. Well, let's see what happens. All right. So when you do this, if you do this in these order, you can think of it as we messed up, or you can think of it as verifying that you installed the GitHub folders right. All right, so if you did that, you should get an error that says cannot find file spout.h, right? In your output log, which is good. It means that the plugin is trying to compile, but it can't find it because you did not compile the Spout SDK. Good news. So what this means is you got to go down. You got to go and grab the Spout SDK files. So to do that, just Google Spouts GitHub and find the one that says Lead Edge Spout 2 is the one I'm using, and hit download zip. And this will download the Spout repo, and this should not take very long. It is not that big. I thought it is only 192 megs, so it's kind of big. And put this on a folder anywhere. It doesn't actually matter where too much. I want to delete my old folder. Just, ooh, shit, wrong thing to click. So just put this anywhere. Doesn't matter where. All right, and you probably already have some of this already set up if you're trying to use Spout, but you know. So go to Spout SDK, go to Source, and open up VS 2010. You should be using 2013, but I mean technically you can use anything here, but for Unreal use 2013. For Spout, as long as you're greater than 2010, open up the SLN file. And a box is going to pop up while you take the hair out of your mouth because something's on my tongue. And then it's going to ask, hey, or it's going to say, hey, we're going to upgrade this project. You hit OK, and it's fine. And I'll do some stuff. There's something stuck in my tongue or my teeth or something. All right, and then change the bug on the top to release, and change Win32 to Win64. And right click Spout SDK and hit build. And this should be really fast. You're going to get some few warnings, but that's fine. One succeeded. And we'll build Win32 just in case you're using Win32. Okay, so once you build those two, you can go ahead and close this. And in the VS 2010 folder, you're going to see two folders. You're going to see Win32, you're going to see x64. So open up x64, open up release, and you're going to see a bunch of files in here, but the two that you want are spout.dll and spout.lib. You can hold down Control and click these two files to select them, hit copy, and then go to your engine folder, which is way far back. Go to your engine folder, and then open up the engine directory inside your Unreal Engine root, and go to plugins, go to runtime, go to spout plugin, go to not there, I'm sorry, go to engine, go to source, go to third party, go to spout, go to Win64, and paste these files in here. Alright, and go ahead and grab your Win32 files located in the same spot where you compiled Spout. So VS 2010 Win32 release, grab spout.dll and spout.lib, copy these, and put them in your engine, source, third party, spout, Win32, paste. Right, you put those there, and now grab the spout DLL that you copied, and this is the Win32 folder. Make sure your Win32, or if you're in 64, use 64. But take the same DLL, and because this is the Win32 DLL, I'm going to go to Engine, Binaries, Win32, and paste that in here. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to grab my Win64 spout.dll. It doesn't matter if you use the one from the VS 2010 folder or the one that you already copied over. They both should be identical. And then go to Engine, Binaries, Win64, and paste that in here. So spout.dll is in both those. Once you've done that, right, you then need to go to Spout SDK source, and instead of going into the Visual Studio 2010 folder, sort by type and make sure you grab only the header files, the .h files. Copy these and then navigate in your engine folder to engine, source, third party, spout, include, and paste these here, right? So now your header files are where this file says put spout headers here. Once you've done that, you don't need to recompile the engine or anything. You should just be, you shouldn't have to reload or regenerate project files, but you will have to recompile your project. So right click my project and hit build, and this should compile your project, linking it to the Spout plugin files. Now, if you've ever done any integrations into any other stuff, there's a lot of steps here, but if you're familiar with the technical details, you'll find that this is actually way easier doing this in Unreal than using any other engine, because there's all these weird linker settings you gotta do and whatnot. It's already all handled for you. Once you put those files where you need to put them, everything is good. And when you compile your project, you should see one succeeded. First try, hell yeah, doing it live. Okay, so once you that's set up, open up your Spout test, or go to your engine and open up your engine binaries. Actually, sorry. One thing we gotta do here is we have to open up the editor in OpenGL mode. So in order to do this, the easiest way to do it is to right click in your engine root folder, your Unreal Engine root folder, and go File, right click New Text Document, and we're going to make a batch file. So to do that, name it something like editor-OpenGL, and instead of saving it as a .txt file, save it as a .bat file. And it's going to say, whoa, hold on there, buddy, this is unsafe. Hit yes. Now right click this and hit edit, and you get Notepad. So in here, you're going to write the path to the engine editor and then add the OpenGL command line, which you can do by doing start engine binaries Win64, Win32 if you want, UE4 editor .exe-opengl. Now, if you're saying right now, couldn't I do that with a shortcut instead of a batch file? Yes, you could, but I prefer batch files. To do it with a shortcut, you can go to your UE4 folder, and you can make a shortcut to your desktop or whatever. And in the shortcut, you can right-click it, hit Properties, and then just type in -opengl at the end here. Either method works. I much prefer the batch file, but up to you. So once you load this up in OpenGL mode and itch your nose some more. Now the first time you load an OpenGL, it's going to take a while to load because it has to load those, it has to compile shaders again, but this time for OpenGL. Alright, so I want to open up my project. And hopefully, I've never actually done this before where I loaded that little launcher window in OpenGL mode and then opened up a project, but hopefully we should be still in OpenGL mode. Why does my nose itch so much? It looks like we're still in OpenGL mode. I can tell because we have to compile shaders again, and compiling OpenGL shaders takes a little longer. So before we do anything, I like to make sure our shaders are compiled completely. So in the meantime, while this is happening, I'm going to open up, well, you should have your Spout tools already set up and whatnot. I believe, I'm not exactly sure on this, but I believe you need to have some form of Spout tray running. I already have my Spout tray running. See, I have a little box here that says it's running, so works for me. I'm not actually sure if you need that, but I always keep it running when I do this stuff. And I'm gonna load up Resolume, or however you say that name, Resolume Arena 4. My nose itches. So I'm running at a 4K display, so it's a little big. So I'm gonna scale this down real quick. And we'll leave this open, but we won't do anything with it for now. We're just getting ready for it to be used. Alright, so once we have our level here, what you're going to need to do in order to capture the scene and send it out is you're going to need to create a scene capture actor. Basically, it's a camera that renders the scene to a target. So you can do that by, in the modes window, typing in scene capture 2D. Drag one of these here. So this isn't your normal type of camera. This is a capture camera, which basically takes the scene and puts it to a texture, as I said. So normally what you would do is you'd assign a texture target to this, but if you make a texture target the traditional way, you cannot set a flag that's called 2 copies.
Resolume Arena 4.
Yep, so Resolume's running. So you need to make sure your texture only has 1 copy of memory. And so my plugin for Spout already has a blueprint way to do this. So what you can do is in your level blueprint, you can encapsulate this into an actor if you wanted to, but for me, for this demo, we'll use level blueprint. So in the minimal default level that loaded up by default, open up level blueprint, and I'm going to select my scene capture in the world. Then I'm going to right click in the blueprint graph, and I'm going to choose create reference to scene capture 2D1. And this gives me this node here, which doesn't really do much, but hey. Then I want to right click and add event, begin play. And so this event node gets fired when the level starts playing. So pretty self-explanatory there. But when the level starts playing, we want to do a few things.
Resolume Arena 4.
We want to shut Resolume up at some point. But then we want to create a create render. So we're not seeing our Spout nodes. Why are we not seeing our Spout nodes? That's a damn good question. Let's see if our plugin's enabled. It doesn't even seem to be enabled. Well, that's pretty damn strange, wouldn't you say? So even though we compiled, our thing, we're not seeing Spout in here. This is where the problem of doing it live comes into play. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I'm going to save this level out. Looks like we compiled our Spout plugin here. So what I'm going to do is I could possibly be running a different version of the engine than I need to be, meaning I have multiple copies of 4.8. It could be loading the wrong 4.8 here. I doubt it, but we'll see. So in my batch file, I'm going to make this run my project -opengl. And this should load the my project that's located in my folder. If you create a shortcut, I mean, this should be working. Bear with me while I debug this, because clearly I screwed something up. Window, plugins. I'm still not seeing Spout. And that scares me a little bit. So let's go to Engine, Plugins, Runtime, Spout plugin. Open this up. Alright, let's open this up in Notepad++ so the formatting doesn't get weird. Let's do enable by default. Maybe we'll set this to false. I'm not really sure what's that about. We'll see what happens. We'll disable the plugin, open it in the editor, see what happens. You don't have to reply if you buy my generic shooter on the marketplace. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to say you bought or anything. You can just use it to do whatever you want with it. Plugins, Spout. Really? That one stupid line? Okay, so for you guys editing the video, you guys can cut back to this back when we tried it earlier, and it should be guaranteed to work because that change will be submitted. So for those following along, that one little is installed false apparently makes it work. So in order to verify that, go back to this. So when you load up my project, in order to verify that Spout is running after you've compiled it, after you put all those files in the right place, go to Window, Plugins, and you should see Spout on the left. You should see my face and make sure that it's enabled. If it's not enabled, click Enabled and hit Restart Now. This will restart the editor and all your problems will be good, will be solved. Alright, so boom. And now we can go back to editing our stuff. So looks like we did not save our scene capture object. I'm not sure why I didn't save it. I'm pretty sure I did. Scene capture 2D. Let's pop this in here. I want to save this as a different map. I want to save it as Spout test. Alright, so with Spout test here, I'm going to take my scene capture 2D, blueprints, open level. Okay, with this, add event, begin play. Again, for those of you editing this video, you guys can cut to the last time we did this, and this should just work. So we do create a reference to our scene capture 2D. Let's do scene texture. God damn it. Right click, create scene, create texture, create render. Sorry, create render target 2D with one copy. And I want a 1920 by 1080 output. I'm going to drag this node into here. Then I'm going to take the scene capture 2D. I'm going to get the scene component, or the capture component. Get capture component 2D. Set the texture target on this. pipe this into here. Then I'm going to right click again and do set spout sender texture source. I'm gonna pipe that same texture into here, and you don't have to do this, but for some reason sometimes begin play gets called multiple times. I want to call a do once function here, just so I know this only gets called once on play, and that should do it. So by hitting play, you won't see anything happen here, but if I open up Resolume Arena 4 and okay, so with this, I go to sources and I have my Spout receiver already installed. I'm gonna click this, and at first it might flicker like crazy, but that's just because when the editor is not being ran, it kind of cuts it out. So a few things you can do to fix some of this is you can go to edit project settings, and you can run your project at a fixed time rate. So if you go to general settings, use fixed frame rate, this might crash when you do it at first, but when you set this on, you're going to run at a locked 30 frames a second. You can lock it at 60. This is useful if you need your visuals to always be capturing or set at a certain frame rate. And another thing you can do is if you go to editor preferences, you can go to miscellaneous, and you can uncheck use less CPU when in background, and you can uncheck monitor editor performance. What this will do is this will make it so that when you alt tab to Resolume, UE4 doesn't scale itself down and make it weaker, because usually that what's happening there is if you alt tab, UE4 is like, hey, you're not using me, let's not use as much power. But in the case of VJing stuff with Resolume, you probably want to always remain at full power. So you uncheck those boxes and you don't, you make Unreal not cap itself. So we hit play, and first thing you might notice is, hey, it's a bit darker. That's because the alpha channel coming in from Unreal is not accurate, is not good. So let's just not use our alpha channel here. And with that, you'll have a capture target that works pretty well.
Resolume Arena 4.
So we can grab our scene capture 2D. It's hard to see when you're playing here, but if you hit simulate instead of selected viewport, you can move the camera around without being that player sphere, and select your scene capture in the world outliner, and then you can move it, and you'll see that your Resolume camera moves. Or if you want direct control, you can right click scene capture actor in the world outliner and hit pilot, and this snaps the viewport to that camera, so you can move your viewport around and your Resolume camera will move, and you'll see that even at 1920 by 1080 it's still pretty smooth. So you're done. And sorry for the really long recorded video, but hopefully some people cut this down and make it concise and shit. But that's it.
Resolume Arena 4.
Shut up. And as you can see, it's not exactly stable because when I quit the engine it crashes. Luckily it only crashes on quit, but hey, it does work, and I'm going to submit that fix for that plugin not being registered, and it should be good to go. So my name is Michael Allar. I am responsible for this long mess of a live tutorial, and thanks for watching.